Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Where Work Meets Life. I'm Dr. Laura, and I'm thrilled to be here today talking with you about why companies should continue to make hybrid work. I've been talking about this topic for many years, and there's an interesting story of how I first got into this topic. So it was the late 90s, and I found myself working in consulting firms, and I had a team that was located across Canada as well as the US, and we had different offices in different locations, and we were communicating through email and phone and early versions of technologies that allowed us to collaborate from a distance back then in the late 90s. And I realized that this allowed me to work flexibly because when I was in Calgary, in my home base, I could work 3 days from home, 2 days from home, and then go into an office and spend time with my team. It allowed these different working arrangements where I could balance some days working remotely and some days in an office and my travel schedule. And it was really the best of all worlds. So then when I embarked upon my doctorate in organizational psychology in 2002, I had to choose a topic for my research to do a big giant research project. And I decided that there were ways to improve how these teams were led when they weren't in the same location. So I embarked upon a study of virtual team leadership. And it was a couple of years of research I did back then. And the rest is history because I ended up spending the last 20 years as that being a passion area that I write about, speak to the media about, research on, and I'm not losing my passion for it because this whole hybrid and remote work is here to stay. And the pandemic really shone a wide global light on this ability that people have to work certain days from home, certain days in the office, which we call a hybrid arrangement. And let's talk about that for a minute in terms of what we mean by hybrid. So we have a continuum basically. So we have people who work remotely 100% of the time, and they are remote workers. And then we have the other extreme where people work 100% of the time in an office, and those are office workers. And then in the middle of that, we have hybrid workers that work a combination of time at home or in the office, as well as from other locations. And this hybrid work became a popular term during the pandemic. And back in the days of the early 2000s, when I was researching hybrid, it wasn't even called that. So we called it telework, we called it virtual work, distributed work, flex work, activity-based work. There was all these different terms floating around. And then when the pandemic hit, we had this knowledge to share with the world about how organizations can lead remotely and create high-performing cultures and teams that don't have to be together every day. So fast forward a couple of years post-pandemic, and we're in a situation where a lot of companies make the decision to call people back to the office. And when I see this happening, and I see the resistance and the frustration in employees, I think, wow, I mean, are you really giving up hybrid altogether? Because what people really want is the ability to have flexibility in their lives and autonomy and trust over their work. And that's a deep need of many, many employees. And the autonomy and flexibility gives them more room, more space to balance the complex needs of work and life. And that doesn't mean cutting off of work early all the time and taking advantage of an employer. What it means is give and take. It means being able to shift your hours around daycare pickup and then work extra time in the evening to make up for it, for example. And it's about setting the goals and expectations, so it's not so much about where that person is sitting, it's about what they're doing and what they're producing that matters. But that requires managers to have clear objectives and goals for people so that if those goals aren't being met, then follow follows the difficult conversation and the curiosity about why these goals are not being met. And sometimes that leads to performance management. Sometimes that leads to the person improving. And there's lots of different outcomes to that. But I really want to say that hybrid work does take more leadership effort and more intentionality, but it pays off in spades. And it's not a one size fits all. So what hybrid work might look like for one organization is different for another, because it depends on the nature of the work and the nature of the teams. And I always say in a team, there's a me and a we. So I might really prefer working 4 days a week from home, and I actually don't want to go in any more than that. But some of my teammates really need that time to be face-to-face and collaborate, because we're working on a type of project that, yes, we can use tools and technologies, but nothing beats that ability to be together for that specific type of collaboration, brainstorming, etc. And frankly, some people get quite isolated if they're at home too many days in a week. They may not have the connection and community around them to fill that gap, and they really want to be in the workplace for that reason. But if they go into the office and there's nobody there and it's gloomy and depressing, that's just not going to fly. We really do have the ability to form communities, connections, as human beings in workplaces, and we don't want to take that away. There's something really special about being together. It's important for onboarding. It's important for mentorship. It's important for spontaneous connections, collaborations, and ideas. And human beings are social creatures. So the time in the office is important. I am not a fan of 100% remote in most cases. But again, there's always going to be exceptions. I have been trained to realize that black and white or all or nothing thinking is dangerous when it comes to human beings. So the latest trends, interestingly enough, are that hybrid work is widespread. According to Gallup, 27% of remote capable full-time employees work from home, and 53% work in a hybrid model. So it's a lot of hybrid work going on. And on average, according to Gallup again, employees prefer 2 to 3 days in the office. The minority prefer fully in the office, and that tends to hover around 10%. So if you're to survey people, what do you prefer? Do you prefer full-time at home, full-time in the office, or a 2-3 day split? You're going to find that it's more like 10-12% that really want to be full-time in the office. And it depends on the industry, of course. Different industries, different strokes for different folks. We don't want to assume that across all industries and geographies that 10% is a standard. But if you ask around people you know and people that work for you, you're going to find the majority prefer a hybrid or a 2-3 day split. But the hybrid can be an inflexible hybrid or a flexible hybrid. So a flexible hybrid is an arrangement where we have a 2-3 day split, but there's flexibility and variability in how that plays out across individuals and across teams. And I always say it's super important for the team to determine their norms or their charter about how they're going to work together and which days they're going to overlap. Because we don't want me choosing a totally different 2 days than you and we never see each other. And what's the point of coming into the office if it's gloomy and lonely? We want offices to be uplifting and collaborative and engaging. So it's important to align on that. So when organizations have rigid hybrid policies, meaning you must come in these 3 days or these 4 days, it no longer becomes flexible work. It no longer gives the autonomy, which is what people crave the most, is flexibility, autonomy, and trust. And if I'm mandating a blanket policy for an office, I'm taking most of that away. And this is the master's student that I sat on her committee, did a beautiful study recently on hybrid work teams, and really found that the more rigid the policy, the less it really was flexible work in the end of the day. So again, you got to think about, as an organization, to what extent do you want to be known as a flexible, trusting employer that gives your people autonomy, or do you want to have more control over where and when people work? And it's a decision. And I always like to say it's really about retaining talent. So I want organizations to be aware that if you cancel remote work altogether, the ability to remote work is gone because it's killing our culture. I mean, that can be a reason that a senior leader or a CEO might say. It's just not working for our culture, or it's killing our productivity. Our performance has been going down. And I say, well, is that the reason your performance is going down? Or could it be other reasons? And do you need to cancel this flexibility 100%? Because that is pretty extreme. And I know in organizational psychology, when you take something away from someone, it does damage. So for instance, if you were to decrease someone's salary, I'm taking some of your money away, or I'm taking your bonus away, that does not usually end well. It deflates the person's motivation. They'll produce less, they'll perform less, they'll look for other work typically. So we got to be really careful about taking something away. And flexibility is a gift, and it is a way of saying that I trust you and work still needs to get done. There's no doubt about it. And a lot of research has shown that people who are working remotely are 10 to 20% more productive. But again, they need to have clear outcomes and goals and great leadership. So that brings me to the final part of this episode, is about great leadership and how we need to develop leaders who can lead people together and apart, and can really understand what is it about work and flexibility that matters to a person, and how can we find the right blend in our people and in our teams between working together and intentional, purposeful days in the office and time working apart remotely. And what I've heard time and time again from my clients and my research is the remote days allow you to focus. There's fewer interruptions at home. There's fewer interruptions. And you might say, what? How is there fewer interruptions? What if I have kids at home? What if I have the temptation to do laundry? And I say, well, first of all, remote work should not be a substitute for childcare. And if it is, that is not right, because we cannot give our best to work when we have young children around, and we're not doing a service to our workplace and honoring our commitment at work, and we're not doing a service to our young children who are stuck on their iPad or TV while we do our work shift. I mean, that's not the way that this should go. And decisions like that end up getting in the way of hybrid work working for the masses, because what they do is they lose trust because their performance suffers. And I would say you should be very, very careful about making sure that if you are working remotely, you have the right setup. You don't have interruptions, you have quiet, you have a space where you can close the door, or figuratively close the door, in terms of you are not interrupted and you're not distracted. And again, it's not a one size fits all. And if you don't have that, then going into the office most or all of the time might make sense for you. So leaders need to have the conversations with their people, understand their situations, understand the blend of home and office that works, and have those difficult conversations about me versus we. So I always think of it in terms of, what does the team need? What does the person need? And let's find a middle ground. And really, you're going to find all kinds of opinions about what people need, because we're all wired differently. We all have different commute times, for example, and the length of our commute time can really impact our desire to work remotely. If I live a 15-minute walk from the office, that might be a great situation for me to go in most or all days. And then on the flip side, if I live an hour away in soul-sucking traffic and I am depleted from 2 hours or more of commuting a day, why would I want to come in every day? Maybe pre-pandemic, that was the world as we knew it. That was an expectation. And then the genie came out of the bottle where I learned that I can get as much, if not more, done working remotely. So why would I go back in 5 days a week and give up 10 hours of my life commuting? 10 hours of my life. This life, which we all have, where we can be spending it in different ways. We can be spending it on our well-being, with our families, with our friends. We can be spending it in nature. We can be getting that time back that would otherwise be spent in a car or on a train. So I encourage employers to really think this through in terms of this push and pull and tug of war of bringing everyone back to the office and continuing to allow hybrid work to flourish. And unfortunately, 80% of hybrid workers, that includes leaders, have not had any official training on how to do this well. And rest assured, there's a lot of ways to do it well, and there's a lot of ways to mess it up. And messing it up is brutal. It's hard for the leader. It's hard for the team. It's frustrating for all parties. Yet there is wonderful training, support, resources to really help organizations flourish when it comes to hybrid and remote work. And instead, if we just throw leaders into it by trial and error, we're expecting them to lead and develop in a way that they don't know what they don't know. So I've been doing this, speaking on this topic, writing, training, podcasting, and the podcasting is really interesting because I've had a few episodes over the course of this podcast where I've brought in guests and talked about this topic. There was one where I talked about fighting the good fight for remote work, and that was with Kaleem Clarkson last year. That's a good episode. He's a thought leader on this topic from the US, and we covered a lot of ground. And 4 years ago, my very first episode of the podcast was, why does it take a pandemic to change the way we work and live, with Philip van Houten, who is my mentor from Belgium. And we talked all about that 4 years ago. And it was a really interesting discussion. He's a thought leader and a curator around this topic. And he wrote a book called The Smarter Working Manifesto way back before the pandemic, because he was really looking at how work can work better and how workplaces can be more engaging and healthy and have better lighting and acoustics, because we don't want to go into a dark, dreary cubicle land or bright office lights, not much natural light, constant interruptions. Unhealthy workplaces are not good places for human beings to do their best work. And in this world, we're up against a lot of challenges. We're up against challenges with geopolitical issues, with the environmental issues, with population growth and diseases and wars. I mean, oh my goodness, these wars are just tragic. And I would say that we need people to be innovating as much as possible. We need solutions. We need incredible teamwork and connectivity and collaboration to solve these messy problems in our world and to continue evolving as a human species. And the human race is evolving, and many people are evolving in their levels of consciousness and realizing that everyone's connected, and it's coming from a place of love versus a place of fear that'll make the world a better place. And that starts in our families and in our workplaces and in our jobs. And hybrid work is one way to show that I trust you, I care about you. I'm not leading from a place of fear where I'm worried that you're screwing over the company by not working when you're supposed to be. I'm coming from a place of trust, and I believe in you, and I will be here to support you. We do have these lofty goals to achieve because it's a competitive landscape, and there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of innovation to be done. So let's do it. Let's utilize AI to save us some time, to be more efficient, so we can focus our energies using our creative genius as human beings and using the creative source from within that needs to flourish. And we need trust and flexibility and autonomy to help that flourish. So that's my messages for today. I hope you found this useful. And if you disagree with some of the points, that's okay. I mean, I'd love to hear from you either way. And I would love you to share this episode if you are having an issue maybe with a leader, a senior leader who's totally against this stuff. If I can help with any articles or episodes, I'm more than willing. And I love to come into organizations and speak on this topic. And including organizations that are resistant to it. I'm open to continuing to spread the good word about why hybrid work needs to continue. I hope you all stay well. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Where Work Meets Life. If you found this content valuable, please rate and review the episode and share with others who may benefit. Visit me on my website at drlaura.live and sign up for my monthly e-newsletter full of tips and resources. I'm also a passionate keynote speaker and would be delighted to speak with you on your speaking needs. Stay well.